My name is Lorri Hayden. I'm retired from the state of Texas. I'm an attorney and worked with the state of Texas for many years and retired 2 years ago. And now I'm an advocate and a volunteer.
You say you guess you're an advocate and a volunteer, so you kind of worked your way into it. It wasn't an official thing.
Right. I volunteer fairly regularly with Justice for Our Neighbors, the Austin region, and that is a nonprofit organization that provides legal services to immigrants, primarily asylum seekers. I also volunteer with Austin Sanctuary Network by giving people rides to San Antonio. Everyone who is pursuing their immigration case who lives in Austin has to go to San Antonio. We're in the San Antonio region, and so they have to go to San Antonio for all of their court appearances. They have to go to San Antonio for ICE appointments, and they have to go to San Antonio for BI appointments. BI is a subsidiary of GEO, one of the for-profit companies in our country that is making billions off of the government in detaining immigrants. They also run prisons, but specifically today I'm talking about immigration. Yeah. They run detention centers, which are basically prisons for immigrants. And then BI is a subsidiary of GEO, one of these for-profit companies that leases to the government.
Like as a contractor or something?
GEO is a contractor.
Okay.
BI, I believe, has its own contracts, but if they don't, they're a subcontractor of GEO. Either way, they're getting paid a lot of money from the federal government. And what BI does is, essentially lease monitoring equipment. So ankle devices, which immigrants call grilletes because they really are shackles. And everything's proprietary. The ankle device, the charger, the battery, they're all proprietary.
Right.
Through Austin Sanctuary Network, I take people to San Antonio usually for one of those three things. Okay. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, mostly.
Yeah. So you actually know a lot about the immigration issues that are very important today. People are talking about it today, and I wanted to ask you about that. I'm sure you have a lot of concerns with what's going on, and I'll just ask an open-ended question. What are some of your concerns, the things you're thinking about regarding immigration?
Oh, so many concerns.
Yeah.
I hate the fact that ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, their budgets have just exploded over the last several years. I hate that it's such a military operation, and we're treating people who are fleeing the most unimaginable circumstances like criminals. I mean, we're treating them, we shouldn't treat anyone, including people who have committed crimes, the way we're treating people, but in particular, people who are fleeing literally for their lives. And they come to our country, and we're putting them in prison, and we're putting them in shackles, and we're making them find rides from Austin to San Antonio at least once a month to have their grillete viewed by BI, so BI can bill the federal government. Or they're going to ICE just to check in. Sometimes for years they have to do this while their court cases are proceeding, and those are also taking longer and longer. I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the budget. I'm concerned about the way we treat people. I'm concerned that we detain anyone. This is a crisis that's invented by our government. There is no reason to be detaining people. In fact, many people coming here, what they want to do is they want to reside here legally. They want to pursue their claims for asylum. They have no interest in living under the radar fearfully every time they see a white van pass by, or every time someone yells ICE. They want to live, they want to pursue their claims, and they want to live here legally. And they are doing everything they can. If they miss an appointment, it's usually because they can't get someone to drive them for the two hours from Austin to San Antonio, or because they have a sick child and can't find someone to watch the sick child. It's rarely, if ever, I suppose there are a few very rare circumstances, but it's very rare that people want to come in and then just live scared and under the radar for the rest of their lives. And in fact, another reason detention is just stupid and not at all necessary is because federal law has the provision for alternatives to detention. And one of those, which includes the grilletes, which I also don't like, but it includes a case management program. And in fact, during the Obama administration, there was a case management program called the Family Case Management Program. And it was only introduced and implemented on a pilot basis, I think in just a few cities, but it showed a 99% effective rate because what it provided to people was assistance. It provided transportation. It provided someone to help them wade through these difficult, awkwardly worded notices they get sometimes from the court or from ICE. It provided support in so many ways, just having their immediate needs met so that they can actually take a day off to go to San Antonio to an appointment. Right. And it was enormously successful. And I think we should bring that back, or something like that, and I think we should make it nationwide. Casa Marianella, a wonderful program here in Austin, provides some of those services, case management services. In fact, when I was working with a nonprofit law firm, and we had a client who was detained in Laredo and was for almost a year before he won his asylum claim. Prior to his asylum hearing, which kept getting rescheduled month after month and prolonging his detention, he also was in a for-profit detention facility. We submitted a parole request to ICE to have him released pending his asylum hearing. And we submitted, along with our parole request, a letter from Casa Marianella saying, here's what we will do. We will make sure he goes to every lawyer's appointment, every ICE appointment, and every court hearing. We'll provide English classes. We will provide health care. We will provide job training assistance. And we will provide housing. That's a wonderful service, and it's very effective and much less expensive than whatever we're paying per day per person in detention for months, years. I've known of people who were in detention in a for-profit facility for 2 years.
Wow.
And longer.
So you've worked with these people directly. I guess it bears repeating. You're not just saying things that you've read. You've worked directly with these people.
Right.
What do they tell you about this whole process?
The detention process or the asylum seeking
No,
process?
you're right. That's a good question. So we'll start with the detention process because that's obviously one of your major concerns that you talked about.
The facilities I have been familiar with somewhat, or at least I have known people in two different facilities in Laredo, and then one in Pearsall. And I had a client, or I worked with a lawyer. I was the subordinate attorney to another attorney, and we represented someone in Pearsall. My experience was they're just awful places. These are ICE detention. They're not what you've read about CBP. They weren't necessarily overflowing. They weren't necessarily crawling with, maggots or whatever, but they're soulless. They are prisons. In fact, the attorneys, you go through a screening process to get in. Then you often wait sometimes for hours to see your client. There are only a few rooms for attorneys to meet with their clients. I found the first person I met with in one of the Laredo detention facilities, she has lived in this country for many years and was very health conscious and did a lot of she was always healthy and did exercises. And I asked her, was there a gym in this facility? Well, no, there's nothing like that. Do you have books to read? No. Is there a library? No. In fact, one thing she did for entertainment was, I guess they shared a newspaper, and she would copy onto a piece of paper the Sudoku in every newspaper so that she could do that. That was her one thing entertainment that she devised for herself. And she also was in detention for 2 years.
These are asylum seekers, though. So what do they say about the asylum process?
It's confusing, and it's getting, I don't know that the asylum seekers say this, but the lawyers will say it's getting harder.
Okay.
So, for instance, many people, there are 5 different categories that an asylum seeker has to prove they're a member of. And one of them, though, and it's really the most common one, is that you're a member of a particular social group. And there are lots of, requirements to meet that. That term is defined by a number of ways. But the other thing about that is that you also then have to prove that your persecution was because you were a member of a particular social group. So, for instance, a person I knew in Laredo, just to cut to the chase, she lost her asylum hearing. And one thing that had happened to her, and her claim was non-gender conforming lesbian. She had a number of groups that she said she fell under: lesbian, non-gender conforming. And one thing that had happened to her in her home country is that gang members surrounded her, and they were all armed, of course, and demanded to know if she was a girl or a boy, and then proceeded to remove her clothing in the neighborhood and in front of the gang members and people who were just sitting on their porches looking on, and then demanded money of her. Well, the judge denied her asylum claim. He found she was a member of a particular social group. He acknowledged that bad things had happened, and he acknowledged that bad things would likely happen to her when she went back to that home country, but did not find that the persecution was because she was a member of any particular social group. It was just. People do bad things, so sorry, you lose, basically. It was horrendous. She lost her case, she appealed, and just recently found out she had lost her appeal. So she will be going back to Honduras, if she's not already there. And so that to me is one of the most horrific things, is the difficulty in convincing not all judges, but more and more judges, that the persecution was because you're a member of a particular social group. They will acknowledge, I've even heard that they acknowledge, you're probably going to be killed when you go back, but it's not because you were whatever, a lesbian or a member of this church or whatever. It's just because there are bad people doing bad things to people.
So then who qualifies if that's the case? All right, well, maybe that's not a question for...
Well, I will say on a happier note that the client in Pearsall, 20-year-old transgender woman from one of the 3 Central American countries that most of our asylum seekers are from, and was in Pearsall for 8 months. That was a successful asylum claim. This person was, raped by gang members as a child, raped by police officers, and the judge did believe that the persecution was based on her identifying and being perceived as a transgender person. So that was, of course, a happy story, but it took so much to get there. She still spent 8 months in detention. She, of course, has suffered enormous trauma. 8 months of detention did nothing to alleviate that trauma. Many of the guards refused to call her by her preferred identity, gender identity. In fact, I think, at least in one case, she was mistreated because of it. So I guess back to the detention centers. I mean, they are prisons. They are pretty soulless. I personally haven't heard of actual abuse, although there certainly are reports that I believe are credible. I myself haven't talked directly to a person who alleged, abuse in the facilities, but in every other way, I mean, all of these things. This type of detention, any detention increases all of the trauma or exacerbates the effects of all of the trauma that everyone has gone through. And it's horrendous. It's, again, for profit. And in fact, another problem of these for-profit detention centers is that for the people in them, when they have their court hearing, the courtroom is in the detention center. You're on televideo or whatever it's called with the immigration judge in San Antonio. Oh no, that's Laredo. In Pearsall, the immigration judge is actually there, but the bailiff is an employee of the for-profit company, in GO in this case, and the for-profit companies often interfere with the whole judicial process in that they will decide they need to put everyone on shutdown because either they say quarantine, but it's been very unclear what that was based on in the past. They'll say, well, this unit's on quarantine, so nobody's having court hearing this week. So they'll be rescheduled for another month or another 2 months. Or sometimes they'll decide somebody's misbehaved, so they're in some sort of isolation. And that is abuse. So, I believe that is abuse. I guess I misspoke earlier when I said I haven't specifically heard of abuse, because I think that is. The other issue about the immigration courts is that the immigration judges are under the Department of Justice. They're not under the judicial system. They're not under the legislative system. They're under the executive branch. So currently, William Barr, a highly politicized attorney general figure, he's in control of the immigration judges. And that's how it's been. I mean, that's not particularly new, but you'll see a lot of cries to make the immigration courts Article I courts, so that they would be, I think, like tax courts, like federal tax courts, or even Article III courts, which are literally under the judicial, branch. Either of those, I'm fine with either of those, but just to take them out of the DOJ branch, the executive branch that is highly partial at this time.
Right.
They're setting all of these immigration policies.
Is that lack of checks and balances? Am I understanding
Hugely
that?
lack of checks and balances, yes.
Okay. I'm not a lawyer, so everything you're telling me is new. And for an average person who doesn't know about this stuff, you're in Central Texas, you're volunteering for these legal organizations. What can people do if they want to help out in that way or learn more about this stuff?
Well, there are so many good organizations, of course, contributing to Raices or American Gateways or Catholic Charities or any of the organizations along the border or any of the organizations that are providing support to the border. Also, Justice for Our Neighbors is a good, again, a nonprofit organization that provides legal support. It's small. There are only 2 employed attorneys there. Then there are a couple of us who volunteer. Well, in all fairness, I do get reimbursed for my mileage, but basically we're volunteers there. And I'm trying to think. Calling your legislators. Haven't called this week, but I'm going to start back up next week, calling and asking. The other issue is just this huge ballooning of funding that we give to ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. I mean, it's just horrendously increased in the last 10 years. I don't know, I'm bad at numbers, I'm not going to throw out numbers, but I think it's around $7 billion. I think ICE's budget now is around $7 billion. Started out at around $3 billion when it was created. I think it's terrifying to me. And these ICE and Customs and Border Patrol, they're siphoning money away from things like FEMA. And so, we've got a hurricane barreling down again toward Puerto Rico, and who still hasn't been, fairly or fully helped from the last hurricane. But all of our money is going to this, again, government-created so-called crisis that isn't one. And I keep telling my legislators when I call, even if you don't care about the people, which by the way is shameful, you should at least care about the money. You Republicans say you care about the money. This is a terrible use of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
So, all of those things.